this session, we want to introduce you to a model called situational leadership. If you remember the last two sessions, we talked about leadership is about capacity and increasing your capacity to impact your organization and the people around you. We also talked about two types of leadership: strategic leadership and tactical leadership. This model we're going to talk about now is a tactical leadership model. This is a tool that you can use every single day as you lead the people in your organization. It's called situational leadership. And I'll tell you kind of how it works. It was a model developed by Paul Hersey, Ken Blanchard, and Dewey Johnson many years ago. And if you want to read more about the research behind it and the development of it over the last several decades, you can buy the book entitled The Management of Organizational Behavior by Hersey, Blanchard, and Johnson. And that'll give you a whole lot more depth and detail into this model. But I want you to just get the essence of it, because if you capture what I'm going to share with you today in this video and in the one to follow, it will make a significant difference in your effectiveness as a leader. Leadership is the ability to call together a group of people around a shared goal or vision and to influence that group to accomplish something extraordinary. John Maxwell says that really leadership is about influence. It's influencing others. And when you think about organizational leadership or leadership in your company, it's about your ability to influence your team and influence those around you to help you achieve a vision or some significant goals that are important to you and your company. And so leadership is that ability to call together people, to pull together people and influence them to work together with you toward that end. Now, in order for leadership to work, leaders have to have power. And sometimes we hesitate to say that because we think power is a bad thing. But the truth is, power is a very good thing in the hands of a good person. Somebody who's got a good motive, a good intent, who's thoughtful of the people around them, for them to have the power of influence and the power to make meaningful, beneficial change. That's what leadership's about. It's about power. And power comes from two different sources. Number one, there's positional power. As the business owner, you have positional power because you sign everybody's paycheck. And everybody knows, you're the boss and we've got to do what you say, because if we don't, we won't have a job. You have positional power because you're the boss. And, if you're in military or organizations where there's obviously hierarchies, there's supervisors and managers and bosses, they have positional power. But there's a second type of power that's even more important than the positional power, and that's called personal power. Personal power is something you earn. It's something that others grant to you over time. It's not because you have a position of power or because you have the ability to sign their paycheck or to give them orders, but you have personal power with people when they respect you, when they care about you, when they trust you. And so as leaders, we want to constantly be building and earning more and more personal power with the people whom we lead. Now, people give personal power to others because they trust them. And we trust people if we feel like they're competent at what they're doing. We trust people if we feel like their motives are good. In other words, they are thinking about everyone's good, not just their own selfish interests. We give people personal power when we feel like they're knowledgeable about something that we're trying to accomplish. So there are a number of reasons and a number of ways you build personal power. But I want to suggest to you that that is the key, and that is more important even than positional power. But the bottom line is you've got to have power, and personal power is always more effective than positional power. I remember watching an episode several years ago on the HBO special Band of Brothers, and there was an army commander who the soldiers, the trainees, I think this was boot camp experience that they were in, they really didn't have a lot of respect for this particular officer, this particular commander. And there was one soldier in this group who just had garnered a lot of personal power with his peers. They respected him, they trusted him, and so sometimes the commander in their unit would give them a command to do something that didn't make sense to them. And it was interesting, they would always look to that peer, if you would, because he had personal power to see what he was going to do and how he was going to react, because they were going to follow him. And if he followed the commander, they were going to follow the commander. But and he fortunately always did, because he was a wise follower. But he knew that, and they knew that. And so that happens sometimes in our companies. You have people in your company who have a lot of more personal power with your employees than you do. And so you want to be sensitive to that and monitor that, and just realize that personal power will oftentimes trump positional power. So we want to be working to increase our personal power, building trust, showing care, nurturing our people, and giving them good, clear direction and tools to accomplish significant things. Now, leadership style is very important, and in this session, I want you to start thinking about what is your leadership style. And actually, in the next session, we're going to dig into it a little deeper. But leadership style is defined as the patterns of behavior as perceived by others. In other words, I may say I'm a directive leader, but if my followers do not perceive me as a directive leader, I'm not really a directive leader, because my leadership style is defined by the patterns of behavior as perceived by others. And so they may view me as a passive leader, but I may think I'm a directive leader. So my leadership style is really passive. Now, it's a problem when we get in that scenario and we do not know how we are perceived by our followers. And you don't want to get paranoid about this, but you do want to be conscious of this. And the way you do it is just be asking yourself, how much influence and how much personal power do I have with my team and the people I'm leading? And there are tools. We have an assessment tool, and there are other tools you can use online that will help you kind of assess what your style of leadership really is. And like I said, we're going to talk about that more in the next session. But right now, I want to focus on 3 key competencies. These are 3 things that you want to really master and get good at as a leader, because they will greatly improve your day-to-day leadership effectiveness. The first competency is what I call diagnosis. To really effectively lead others, you need to diagnose the situation. And by the way, this is called situational leadership, because as a leader, I'm most effective if I can assess a situation and adapt my leadership style to fit that situation. And that's why Blanchard and Hersey and Johnson called it situational leadership. It doesn't mean that your values change or your ethics change or you compromise anything important. What it means is you are watching your leaders, your followers, you're tuned into them, and you're adapting your style of leadership to fit their need at that moment. And so the way we begin is by diagnosing a situation. And there are 2 things that we do in diagnosis. First, we define the task. What is that task that needs to be accomplished? And you can approach it from the standpoint of an individual. What is the task I need this individual to accomplish? Or you can approach it from the standpoint of the group or the team. What is the task I need the team to accomplish? And you must define that very clearly. And that's why in our section on people management, we talk about the importance of job descriptions, because good job descriptions define the task, and they help you with this particular aspect of leadership. So diagnosis begins by defining the task, but then secondly, by assessing the readiness of the people who are going to be doing it. How ready are they? Do they have a high level of readiness? I mean, do they know what they're doing? Do they have the skill? Have they done it before? Are they motivated to do it? If so, they have a pretty high level of readiness. Or you may have a task that they've got to accomplish, but they don't have a lot of skill, they don't have a lot of motivation, they don't have a lot of experience, and so their level of readiness is low. It doesn't mean they can't do the task. It just means you've got to lead them differently. And so that's the concept, adapting your style of leadership to fit the situation and the needs of your followers. It begins with that first competency, diagnosis. The second competency that you want to develop is adaptation. And there are basically four general styles of leadership. There's a directive style. Blanchard and Hersey and Johnson called that a telling style. Secondly, there is a persuading style, or they called it a selling style of leadership. Thirdly, there is a participating or a collaborating style of leadership. And then fourthly, there is a delegating style of leadership. Those are the four styles of leadership, generally speaking, that I want you to be thinking about. Now, your followers in different situations will perceive you in one of those four ways. They will perceive you as either a directing, telling leader, or a persuading, selling leader, or a participating, collaborating leader, or as a delegating leader. And in the right situation, each of those styles of leadership is good. It works in the right situation. But in the wrong situation, that style of leadership could be counterproductive and undermine your effectiveness as a leader. So that brings us to this second competency, is adaptation. Once you diagnose a situation and you've defined the task, you've determined the readiness of your followers, you then want to think about, okay, how do I behave now as a leader? Do I give direction? Do I persuade? Do I collaborate with them? Or do I just delegate this to them and get out of their way and just be a resource that's available when they need me, if they need me? And so you adapt your style of leadership to fit the situation. And that's not always easy to do. It sounds easy, but it's not always easy because we have habits. We have patterns that we do as people. And so you want to be conscious of how you behave and how you act as a leader and how others perceive you as a leader, and then learn to adapt so that they perceive you differently. But appropriately, you adapt appropriately for a given situation. The third key competency is communication. You've got to be able to articulate and communicate clearly in a way that they understand. If they do not understand, you have not communicated. And I know a lot of times I talk to business owners, they say, I tell them, but apparently communication's not happening. So you want to be able to communicate in a way that's clear, preferably concise, and that promotes understanding. They understand what it is you want them to do. So as an introduction, I want you to be thinking about these three key competencies and work on those competencies, and we'll be talking about this in more depth in our next session.